Again, thank you for staying with us. And now we're going to give you some more information that's a bridge from what you've already learned to this portion, which has to do with life insurance policies. How do we get them? How do we buy them? What is the procedure? If you're a seller of a life insurance policy, you're going to want to pay particular attention to this to see if you qualify, if you want to sell. And if you're on the other side, what policies are we looking to buy? Okay? As an investment, remember, there are policies which qualify as an investment, and there's life insurance policies that do not qualify as an investment. So let me just jump to that fact very quickly. It's not complicated. Let's say, for example, that you're a typical person that has a life insurance policy, and we're going to go back in history now. Number one, your policy is over 2 years old. Why is that important? Because within the first 2 years, if you were to do something like die from an illness that you didn't tell us about, we don't have to pay off the policy, but we do have to give you your money back, all right? But after 2 years, after that, you're home free. So your policy, number one, is a requirement that your policy be over 2 years old. Number two, when did you buy the policy? That's not so important for us, but it is important for you. Normally, when we buy policies, they're from people that are senior citizens. They bought the policy a long time ago with the purpose in mind. And the purpose is an absolutely wonderful purpose. You get married, you start to have children, you start to think, husband and wife, as you're talking, what would happen to us if you died? I'm talking about the breadwinner, the person that's creating the income that pays for the mortgage, for the groceries, for the college education, and everything. What happens to the family if the breadwinner dies? Well, the only protection you can have is insurance, all right? Another way, of course, you could buy real estate. You can buy other investments so that you have a lot of assets that they can depend upon to take care of them. But for most people, they buy a life insurance policy, and the life insurance policy can be, who knows, 5 million, 10 million, depends upon the kind of life that you want for your family, and also the premium payments that you have to make. It has to fit into the family budget. You can always change your life insurance policy if you start with a policy of $1 million because it's very inexpensive, but later on in life, as your income continues to increase, and as inflation takes over, you might decide to increase that policy. Now, you're not going to take the same policy and just say, well, call the insurance company and say, well, I want you to change it from $1 million to $5 million. More than likely, because it's a new policy, you're going to have to go through a physical again, all right? So it's not as simple as calling the agent and say, change my $1 million policy to $5 million. More than likely, you're going to get another $4 million worth of life insurance, in which case you have to qualify for it, all right? That's the procedure. So here you are, you've been making payments on your life insurance policy for all these many years. Well, the only way you can get that money back, obviously, is to die. I mean, it's a life insurance policy, and it is going to pay your family when you die. Now, that's not a particularly attractive thought for you, but anyway, it is protection for your family. Now, what does that have to do with us buying the policy? Well, there's one thing we're looking for. As an investment, we're not looking to buy a policy from somebody that's going to live another 20 years. I'm sorry to say, the investor doesn't want to make it 20 years. Remember, when we buy your policy, we own the policy, whether I buy the policy or the people in the portfolio. You own a percentage of all the policies that are in there. Okay, if we have 8 policies, you have a percentage ownership in those 8 policies. So that's called diversification. So we don't want a policy that's going to be 20 years because since we own the policy, guess who's paying the premiums? We're paying the premiums, which means you, as the investor, of course, a portion of the money is set aside in an escrow account to make sure that the policy will stay in force. throughout the life of the policy. All right, that's what we want. We don't want to miss a premium and have the policy canceled, right? So we've taken care of that. So when we buy the policy, we take into account their life expectancy. And because we know, or we have an estimate of their life expectancy, we know how much money needs to be set aside in an escrow account. And so let's say the life expectancy, which we refer to as an LE on the illustration, life expectancy is 5 years. Now, we use the same people that determine the premium on your policy when you bought it originally. Somebody has to do that, and it's based upon the size of the policy and also your health. That does determine the premiums on the policy. So we use the same people, the actuaries, and they came up with a figure. What is the premium going to be? Now, I think you understand that as you get older, the premiums are going to go up. So if we buy a premium and you're the insured and you're 68 years old, do you think the premiums are going to stay the same when you're 75 to 80? No, your premiums are going to go up. And we have to make an adjustment for that because we have to make the premiums until such point as the life insurance policy is actually distributed. I was going to say the key word, but we don't want to go there, right? But anyway, it does happen. You pass away, we get paid, but you got paid already because we bought your policy for cash. So you're happy because now you don't have to get cash only when you die, in which case you don't enjoy the benefits. It goes to the beneficiary. If we buy your policy, we're the beneficiary. And we have to make the premium payments. That's our obligation. So we're not looking for a 20-year maturity. So what does that mean? Your health does play a role in the price that we pay to buy your policy. If you're extremely healthy, it's unlikely that we'll buy your policy. We would ideally like to have policies in our portfolio where the life expectancy is, let's say, from 3 to 7 years or from 5 to 7 years, something in that category. That's our portfolio. The investors are attractive to that. By the way, there's one other thing that we do. Let's say your life expectancy legitimately is 5 years. Well, that means for 5 years, we have to put the money aside to make sure the premium is paid for the next 5 years, but we add 2 more years onto that. So if your life expectancy is 5 years, we're going to have enough premium in the escrow account that no one can touch, so that if you live longer, we're still going to pay the premium. Now the reverse is true. Let's say that somebody does pass away in the first year, which is unlikely, but it does happen. Okay, that means that we've got 5, 6 years of premiums that we don't have to pay. What happens to that money? It stays in the escrow account because it is not an exact science, but we never want to run out of money to make sure that every life insurance policy that we have in our portfolio, every premium is paid. Okay, we never want to have a policy expire because we didn't pay the premium. That's not going to happen. As a matter of fact, one company that I represent has an additional insurance policy, so there's never going to be a call on the investors, because should the money in the escrow account ever run low, the insurance company takes over. So you're never going to get a call for a premium. But anyway, those are variables that you can ask me about, and we're happy to share that with you, and it's all in written material. Okay, so we're looking to buy policies. The minimum size policy is 100,000, but we can go all the way up to 5 million, 10 million in policy size. We'll buy your policy if you meet our criteria. Okay, now what happens? You're an investor, and you invest your money, and you have a percentage of ownership of each of these policies. And let's say 2 years, let's not use the example of 1 year, even though it does happen sometime. Somebody gets an illness that's unexpected, but their life maybe pneumonia or something that affects their lungs, and they die in the first year. Okay, the question then you ask to me is, well, Chuck, how does that affect my payment if somebody doesn't live 5 years. Because the ideal situation is if everybody in that portfolio lived exactly for 5 years, you would get $1.60, which is 12% a year, right? Well, what happens if 2 years, or even 1 year as an example? For every dollar invested, you get $1.60. And it doesn't make any difference when the person dies. If it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, as long as somebody does die within a period of 5 years or less, anything less than 5 years means your rate of return is higher than 12%. You understand? The example that I gave you is simple, but I want to emphasize it again because I don't want you to misunderstand this very important feature. If somebody were to pass away in the portfolio, one person die the first year, you get $1.60. As I told you before, it doesn't make any difference whether it's the first year or the 5th year or the 6th year or the 7th year. You're always going to get by contract that we signed together, you're going to get $1.60. All right? So what is that rate of return for 1 year? I mean, if somebody dies the first year within the first 12 months and you get $1.60 for every dollar invested, that's 60% on your money. Isn't that correct? Well, it's ideal, it's wonderful, but it's not repetitiously going to happen on every portfolio. As a matter of fact, I cannot predict for you, nor can anybody else. When you buy into a portfolio that has a life expectancy of between 3 and 7 years, which is typical of what we buy, there is no one that can tell you exactly when someone's going to pass away. Do you understand that? The uncertainty, if there's one negative in this whole conclusion, the conclusion is there is some uncertainty as to when you're going to get paid. Every time somebody passes away, you're going to get paid. Whether it's the first year or the 5th year or the 6th year, the amount doesn't change. The contract is, we know what the cost of the life insurance policies are. We have that fixed number, and we also know the maturity value of the policy. It's all in writing, so therefore it doesn't make any difference the year, but it does affect your yield. It does affect your rate of return. However, you're not going to get a check every month. This is not a fixed income investment, all right? You're going to get paid when the policy matures. That's when you're going to get paid. How much are you going to get paid? $1.60 for every dollar invested. So if you want income every month, that's called a bond. We can get you income every month, but it's not life insurance policies. They're corporate bonds. We can get you a corporate bond that pays 8.5% for 1 year, 2 year, but that's a different investment entirely. And by the way, it's not insured. Life settlement is 100% insured. Why? Because everything we're buying is a life insurance policy. And in 150 years that they've been keeping a record, 150 years, there's never been one case of a life insurance policy not paying. All right? 100% expectation you will get paid. Isn't that what you want? Safety, security, and predictability? Well, to the extent possible, we give you those things, which makes it an ideal investment for your retirement account. You can sit down and do some calculations, and you can figure that in this particular case, when you retire, the money in your account is going to grow substantially. We'll work with you on that. We'll work the figures, but you have confidence that you are not going to lose any money, but you're going to get 12% per year on your money. Now, ready to go to the last segment, which I consider to be equally as important as the other two. Once you know this is a right investment for you or your retirement account or for your mother-in-law's savings account or whatever, then we have to talk about where do we get the policies? And also, how can you participate? So that is what we're going to talk about next.